Could this be the day for Greg Moore and the players team from Canada? I don't think Michael has enough time. Moore thinks he has it won, and with his fist in the air, Moore draws to a couple of car lengths away, and he will win the US 500.
He sees the flags and fist raised in the air. Greg Moore is the winner.
To the checkered flag, Greg Moore is going to take his first win of the 1998 season. A brilliantly driven race.
The gamble pays off. Greg Moore takes his 5th career win. His 4th on an oval.
Hi, I'm Ashley Judd. Thank you for joining me for Greg Moore, A Racer's Life. Many of you may be wondering what in the world is a girl like me doing hosting a show about a champ car driver. Well, the fact of the matter is that Greg Moore touched my life maybe as much as my own parents touched my life. Greg was the one who introduced me to my fiance, Dario Franchitti. Dario and Greg were best friends on the track, best friends off the track. And in 1999, Greg talked Dario into going to yet another party, and it was at that party that we met. I only knew Greg a short while, but he meant the world to me. He was funny, he was sweet, he was so boyish and tender and dear, all the things I never thought a macho racing car driver would be. Probably my most outstanding memory of Greg is that he was the nexus for all of the friendships on the track. He was like the centrifugal planet around which all the other guys orbited. From what I understand, before Greg was in Champ Cars, there wasn't the kind of camaraderie that he had helped inaugurate. Tony, Dario, Jimmy, I mean, I'm almost afraid to say names because I know I'll leave some of the guys out. They will all tell you that Greg was their best friend, and the fact of the matter is, he was. So I'm very grateful to the Moore family for asking me to be a part of this special. It means a lot to Dario and me. And Greg, you were sorely missed. Greg Moore's love of cars was a natural fit. His father, Rick, had an automobile dealership in their hometown of Maple Ridge, British Columbia. That Greg would grow to love racing cars seemed just as natural. Dad and good friend Peter Balget had been involved in the sport for a long time. As a toddler, Greg could often be found in the garage, sitting in his dad's old retired Can-Am car, rattling the gear lever, tugging the steering wheel, all the while making motor sounds through pursed lips. Before long, auto salesman Rick took a mini car in trade. 6-year-old Greg didn't have to make his own motor sounds anymore.
In those days, we weren't open on Sundays, and we'd put a blocker across so no car could get on the lot, and he'd just drive around and around the building, and I'd go in and do a little work, and then he'd come in saying, "Can you help me?" And we'd go out and scrape the thing off the wall or off the rain gutter and kind of hammer it out, and away he'd go again. And one of my mechanics that was his job every Monday morning. This cart was sitting in his stall. Had to have a toe link replaced or straightened out and whatever. And then when he was, I think, around 10, Peter and I went and did the 6-hour race, the last one at Riverside, driving a GTO car, and he came down with us. And when we came home, he said, "You know, I'd like to have a go-kart." By then, this one had pretty well been chewed up enough, it pretty well bit the dust. And I said, "Well, why?" I said, "Well, I'd just like to have one and drive around." So we kind of bought him one, and he drove around it. We'd go up to Westwood at night when nothing was happening and sneak out in the track and drive around the little sprint track. And then one day he said, "Well, I'd like to go to a race." So we went to a race and joined the Westwood Karting Club, and was assigned, his membership number was 99. We didn't have a number plate for this go-kart. They said, "Well, what number do we run?" He said, "Well, whatever you want." And I said, "Well, Greg, you're the 99th member. Why don't you run number 99? And that's where the 99 came from. And lo and behold, he won 2 of the 3 heats of his first race ever and kind of never looked back.
Everyone who saw Greg Moore in those early days was impressed by his natural gifts. Obviously, he could go fast, but was he cut from tough enough cloth to be a racer in every way? Rick Moore was very careful to make sure.
He was a pretty fortunate young man. He was blessed with a lot of natural ability in a lot of things, I think. And I really felt that if he was going to be given these things which are extras, or he had to work for them. And work for them meant being a good student, you know, getting an acceptable grade, which was a B level grade, and working at his trade. You know, he had to work at it. And he said, if you're going to get to this level, you know, you have to work. Every corner or every lap is work, not just go out and drive around. When we used to go out to practice, as I told you, we'd sneak up there nights and practice. And, you know, I used to time him all the, you know, virtually time every time he was in anything. And I know the odd time he'd slide this cart around a corner, and I'd go out and wave him in. I said, you know, how'd that feel? He said, oh, it felt really good. And I said, well, it cost you 0.2 of a second. You were slow that time. And he said, if you do that again, we're going home. Session's over. We're doing the enduro carts, the lay-down carts at Portland one year in the North American Championships. He spun. It was wet, little patches of rain, whatever, and he spun, kept the thing going, and was back to third. And Linda Emick, who was his chassis owner, went down to turn 9 at Portland. And, came up to me after the race. He won the race, came back and won it, and said, you'd never seen anybody like that. Just unbelievable, like lap after lap. Just totally, you could just see the cart was just almost on the edge of control. And one of the corner workers in turn 6 came over to me and said, I was there with my friend, we saw Greg spin, and he said, that's it. And he said, and I can't tell you what it was, but the next time he came by, it was like an aura behind that mask. You couldn't see his eyes, but you knew. I said, I turned to my friend and said, he's going to win this race. And he won it. He said, you could just see the way the cart came in the corner. So, and I think when he became 16, I said, or 15 actually, we sent him to Richard Spinard. I convinced Richard to take him back to Shannonville to their Formula 2000 school. And I think there was 40 people there. He won the school, was the fastest guy there. And this was in August. He'd only turned 15 in April, so obviously he had no driver's license. And we came back in the fall for the shootout, which was the best of 600 or 800 people had gone through the thing, and again 40 people, and he won that. And Richard said he can make it. You know, it's going to be tough, but he can make it. He has the ability.
Greg also had an extraordinary ability in another arena, hockey. For a time, the two sports appeared headed for a collision. Dad knew a choice had to be made, but never had to ask the question.
He made the decision unbidden. It was totally his. And I said, well, he said, you know, at some point you're going to have to make a decision, but I had never got that far with him.
Greg was now 15. Family wisdom determined nothing further could be gained in go-karts. They had to move up and needed help. Rick called on an old friend, Steve Chalice.
You know, Steve had a dream to become a professional engineer or whatever. He has a little gasoline alley, a little repair shop, and it's called Gasoline Alley in North Vancouver. And he had actually worked on a Trans Am car with Peter Belgier, my friend. When Peter and I shared a car, and he had worked with us, and we drove Gordy Oftedal's Trans Am cars, and he'd come and work with us. And he worked with Ron Fellows and when he did the Players GM series. And I think Steve saw that, you know, at a very early age, when I phoned Steve out of the blue and said, can you put a Formula Ford together? And he said, well, between Kent and I, we can, I guess. Why? And I said, well, can you? And he said, yeah. I said, well, can you do one for me? He said, well, sure. He said, when will be there? And I said, in about 2 hours. It was at the airport. This Van Diemen we had bought from brand new from England had arrived, and I really hadn't any idea who the hell was going to put it together. So I phoned Steve and shipped the car over there, and we met, and they just kind of clicked. You know, Steve was at that time kind of a hippie guy, laid back, and Greg was this excited kid. And then we put this Formula Ford together, went to Seattle to try and test it, and did 4 laps, an engine broke, did 4 laps, another engine broke. It was a bit of a design problem they had. And my other fellow, Scott Steele, threw the Van Diemen in a horse trailer and headed for Mosport. The engines went back to J. Ivy, and they were flown out to Mosport. And Steve and I were, and Greg were flying economy at the bulkhead going back east. And Steve said to Greg, you know, this is the hottest Formula Ford deal probably in the world. You know, there's going to be 40, 50 cars, good cars there. And he said, if you work really hard, you might get a podium or 2 this year. And Greg, his first race at Mosport, qualified second and finished second. Then the second race at Shannonville, he qualified second and he won. And then next one, he was on the pole.
When we first saw him drive, we did a test at Seattle on the track there and in his Formula Ford, and he looked like a tidy driver, but without any experience of watching other Fords at Seattle or having anyone to gauge our performance by. I was a bit unsure of how good he really was, but I thought he looked like a good driver, and I thought he had good feedback right away. He was saying sensible things, and so I think right away I thought that he was going to be pretty good. And then when we got to Eastern Canada and started racing in the SO ProTech series for 1600s, it became obvious that he was very talented and a lot of natural ability, or natural or something that he'd worked on in karting, whatever. But when I started working with him, he was already a great driver. There was no doubt about it. I think he had a lot to learn about cars versus karts, but he's a very intelligent kid, so he picked it up very quickly.
Quickly enough to earn Rookie of the Year honors in the 1991 SO ProTech Series. In 1992, he was Rookie of the Year and champion of the USAC's Formula 2000 West Series. By the end of that year, everyone agreed it was again time to move. Greg Moore was determined to move beyond Formula 2000 in 1993. Team Moore thought that Formula Atlantic would be a good fit, and Greg had grown up watching Atlantic stars like Gilles Villeneuve at Westwood. They had an engine deal, they had a chassis available, they also had an underage driver. The SCCA wanted no part of it.
We went to them with his driving record and the school record and whatever, and they just said, we didn't do it for Unser, we didn't do it for Andretti, we're not going to do it for you. And I guess then I went to Roger Bailey, we sat down with him in Vancouver, and they all said, well, we'll work with you. They didn't say they wouldn't do it, we will work with you. And they eventually granted him kind of a provisional license. It was a little unusual. The first two races, which were in Phoenix and Long Beach, he was only 17 years old, so he wasn't allowed to be in the pits. And it was kind of an unusual thing. He had to sit in the car and steer the car through the paddock into the pit area, and he couldn't get out of the car. And then he had to be in the car and be towed back into the paddock area until he could get in the car, because he wasn't allowed to be in the pits. But he could drive the car.
The student learned his lesson well. Stories of a new wunderkind began filtering through the kart community. Stories that caught the eye of another rising Canadian star who had already risen to Indy cars.
There was quite a bit of press about it. I would say more on the west coast of Canada than the east coast. But the stuff that I saw, it was funny stories, because he used to wear the round glasses like I wore. And he wanted to get up to the IndyCar ranks, and I said, "Who's this guy think he is, man? Trying to look like me, and had the round glasses, and he was a lot thinner than I was, but I mean, it's like he was, So I read some press clippings that he said he wanted to race against me, and I'd been winning races in IndyCars at that time in '92 and '93, so it's just at first I thought, what's up with this kid, and then. Got to know him really well, and was a great friend.
Greg never seemed as young as he was. He looked it, and that presented a few minor problems at tracks on occasion, but when he was driving, he was more mature at 17 and 18 than a lot of other drivers who were 5 or 6 years older than him. Milwaukee was the big weekend, because Milwaukee's notorious for heavy-handed security, getting on people on their scooters and so forth. And on more than one occasion, Roger bailed him out one time, and another time I walked up while Greg was very politely being turned away from going in. He didn't look old enough to get into the pits to drive his race car.
That season, while entering his 18th year, Moore ran the entire light schedule. His best finish was 3rd in Portland. Still in high school, Moore made it home from that race in time for the prom that night. The following spring, an issue far more threatening reached critical mass: money.
Our budget for the second year of Indy Lights was like $380,000, and other teams' budgets. But we ran, and that's why he could run so long on tires. I mean, we'd get the guys takeoff tires and go testing them, you know, people would go out and test Indy Light races for 70 miles, and that's how long they'd run their time. We'd run them for 210 miles because we couldn't afford to buy more. And, you know, that's why he didn't break parts in cars, because we couldn't afford to replace gearboxes. And my house was mortgaged. We were pretty close, and we had no money. And I don't know how we would have made out if we didn't have a sponsor in 1995. Yeah.
The situation required creative thinking, some luck, and a pleasant surprise. The surprise came later, the luck came early. The confluence of a young man's skill, a dad's bravado, and a Belgian insurance man named Guy de Klerk.
I basically bet him $5,000 that Greg would win the race. And the bet was that the prize money, which was $20,000 at the time, doubled if he won the race. But the premium was $5,000. So I gave him $5,000 up front, and of course he won the race. And so I got $20,000 from him, and I got $20,000 from the series, and that kind of got us started for the year. And partway through that year, we had a sponsor, Viper, earlier in the first year. Greg just met the people on an airplane, met the wife of the company owner, and just really gorgeous people. And they were the sponsors totally in '94, and they ran into a huge patent war with their major competitor. And his legal bills were astronomical, out of sight, and he just said he couldn't do it. And we had never had a contract, we'd had a handshake, and I'll never forget in '94, he phoned me on a Wednesday night. We were on our way to Loudon, New Hampshire, and I had to buy tires for two races. That was probably $5,000 for your 2 tire bills. I had to pay the balance of my engine lease, which was $20,000, and to pay the balance of my insurance, which was $20,000. And Mr. Viper called me and said, "How are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're doing okay." He said, "Well, I see you're doing really well." And he said, "You got any money?" And I said, "Not a nickel." At that point, I had about $2,000 in the bank. And there was just silence for a minute. And he said, "I got $40,000. I'll send you a check."
Able to ignore that financial strain, Greg performed well. He scored 2 poles and 3 victories that year and finished 3rd in the championship. At Phoenix, he became the youngest driver ever to win a CART-sanctioned event. It was clear, though, the family business could not carry the load another year. They had to find help to support their dream. Players and wealthy sportsman Jerry Forsyth had an Indy Lights team. Seasoned Canadian veteran Claude Bourbonnais was scheduled to drive. But might there be room for one more?
It was fairly obvious towards the end of 1994, and particularly with some of the after-season testing that Greg had done before he even came to us, that he'd matured quite a good deal during 1994 and had learned a lot at the post-season testing. So we expected great things and certainly expected him to be competitive. I think that he benefited most from being able to disassociate himself from any of the usual concerns of, you know, where's the money coming from, or, you know, how many tires do we have? An awful lot of things were put into place whereby neither he nor the people who'd been around him for several years any longer had to worry about some of the things that they perhaps struggled with previously. So I guess if anything, you know, my role was to act, you know, for and on behalf of players as the enabler, to provide them with the tools, the backup, and all of the equipment necessary for them to maximize all of the potential that they'd been gathering.
Potential that paid spectacular dividends. Greg Moore's 1995 light season may never be equaled. He won 10 of 12 races, including 5 in a row. He finished every mile and every lap while leading 64% of the laps during the year. He scored 242 points in the championship, winning the title by a staggering 102-point margin. He surpassed a number of records set by fellow Canadian Paul Tracy just a few years earlier.
Well, it was something that I didn't want to see get broken, but, you know, ultimately records are made to be broken. They're never going to last forever. So I guess the one great thing about it is that it was another Canadian, another guy from Canada, and that led for a great opportunity for him with players to get up to the IndyCar level, and he's obviously was a great IndyCar driver with a lot of wins in a short amount of time. So, you know, he was deserving of those records, and I think that they're going to stand for a long time.
When we went to first street race, which was Miami, first race of the year, In the first session on a very slippery green track, he's 2.48 seconds quicker than the next Indy Lights car. He came in and said, "Dad, I'm setting the standard. That's the standard all year." And he believed.
Everyone that mattered agreed. Greg Moore's apprenticeship was concluded. Every challenge had been met, all obstacles swept away. His skill and maturity belied his years. The searing heat of battle had forged an extraordinary racing man. Again, it was time to move. And this time, it was to the very top of the mountain. Not yet 21, Greg Moore made his IndyCar debut on March 3, 1996 in South Florida. Winter testing had gone well, and players' interests were hoping for a great result at Homestead. Greg had bigger ideas. He figured he could win. Save a critical error that drew a penalty from race officials, he might have done it. He unhappily settled for the day's fastest lap and 7th place. Team manager Neil Mickelwright, watching from the pits at Homestead, offered only one word to describe what he had seen: staggering.
I think as much as anything, it was the way in which Greg approached, his first race in Champ Car racing. And certainly it can be a very awe-inspiring situation to suddenly find yourself amongst many people, many drivers whom Greg himself had claimed had been his heroes for some time. He was not intimidated by that, but more importantly, he wasn't distracted by it. He didn't, all of a sudden, they were still heroes, but he didn't look upon them as having achieved something that was beyond his grasp. And he was very level-headed, was not about to be second best to anybody. And I think he proved himself to be very competitive, but also very level-headed even at that point.
Homestead was the first time that Greg Moore played to a live worldwide television audience. Formula One legend Frank Williams watched on television and quickly inquired about Greg's ability as a test driver. Told that Greg was under contract elsewhere, Williams asked to be kept in mind in the future.
I got here in '96 to do Indy Lights, and the first race was Homestead. And Greg used to do really well. And of course, because I was doing Indy Lights, you always look who was the champion before. And I knew it was this guy called Greg Moore, who didn't look at all like a race car driver with his round glasses like Tracy said before. And I'm like, well, let's see what this guy can do. He had won like 11 out of 12 or 10 out of 12 races in Indy Lights. I'm like, let's see. And I sat down in the stands to watch the race, and he was flying. He was leading the race, and he did very well. Actually, he always did well in Homestead, and I'm like, whoa, this guy's pretty good. He was racing like a champion. I remember, saw him passing Junior and then go side by side with each other, and like, it's the guy's first race, and I was pretty impressed.
Brazilian Tony Kanaan watched his first Champ Car race from the grandstand and saw the same thing that caught the eye of Scotsman Dario Franchitti, watching in Germany whilst sitting alongside Mercedes boss Norbert Haag.
It wasn't only my eye, it was, Norbert was I think as astounded as I was. From my experience, I hadn't been to an oval at this point. My experience, people overtook on the inside, and Greg obviously didn't find that working for him, and he was just passing guys around the outside. It was his first race, and they're going, "Oh, this rookie guy," and I'm like, "This guy's a rookie." He's millimeters off the wall, and that story went on for the first half of that season, his first season. This guy was leading races, having things break, and I was just astounded. I thought, this guy's good. This guy is awesome.
Here he is now, challenging for third place in Greg Moore.
Yeah, he is storming her. Oh, and Moore sideways.
Greg Moore has gone sideways.
He hasn't did anything yet.
If he can control it, he may be able. What
He's
a
okay.
great piece of driving by Greg Moore.
Spectacular.
Absolutely.
The mix of everything, the car control, the thought that went into what he was doing. I mean, he was a rookie and he made some rookie mistakes, but I'll tell you what, he was at times he made some very smart moves in that first 6 months I'm talking about. I mean, we all know how he developed as a driver after that. But just the will to win, I think, was awesome. It was great to watch.
Greg earned 3 podium finishes in 1996, his best being second at Nazareth. He finished 9th in the championship and 2nd in the Rookie of the Year tally. It was a fine inaugural season, everyone knew it, in spite of a nagging notion that there could have been so much more.
Every driver thinks that it's going to be easier than it is, because they've done so well in the series that they've been in up until that point. They perhaps miss at times that there's really only the very best that get into Champ Car racing. Greg, the nurturing that he needed was, he certainly was not somebody that needed a word of confidence in order to help his confidence. I mean, he had plenty of confidence. There were things I think that he didn't quite understand, and didn't understand sometimes maybe, okay, I'm trying this hard and the car feels reasonably good, so why aren't we going much better? Or when we are going quickly, why do things happen that stop me from being able to win the race? And so really the nurturing that was required, I think, was more a question of explaining to him as we went along and as he became more familiar with Champ Car racing, some of the pitfalls, some of the things to be aware of, some of the head games that can be played, some of the political issues that can rear their head, and just basically being able to deal with an awful lot more things going on around him than had perhaps happened in the past.
He knew he was driving with the best in the world, and we obviously had lots to learn. We had an engineer that never engineered an Indy car. We had, kind of pretty inexperienced people on our team in a large number of ways. He didn't know some of the tracks. I think he expected he would have to pay his dues. And, perhaps it wouldn't have been right if he'd won his first race. I mean, that would, I think partway through the year, he started to push too hard, probably, particularly in the road courses. And, you drive a car, Indy car too hard, and you actually go slower. I think in the off season, we said, well, what can we do to be better? We can be in better shape. We can put more emphasis on our testing. And he just did whatever he could to become better.
Greg Moore, Rick Moore, and Steve Chalice began their second season of Champ Car racing, convinced that they were ready to win races, convinced that they were ready to challenge for the championship. In the space of the next 24 months, they tallied 5 victories, starting with an historic day at the legendary Milwaukee Mile. After passing for the lead twice on the track and losing the lead twice in the pits, Greg's team took a huge gamble on fuel, and the gamble made history.
I covered about 80 miles, I think, in that day myself, just pacing back and forth. I had a radio, and I was in turn 4, and I was pacing back between the straightaway and back, and watching him come into 3, and then back on the straightaway, and of course listening to the fuel strategy and the fact that he had almost got hit. Bobby Rahal almost hit him in the pits on the last pit stop. And our pit stops at the time weren't the quickest. One of the slower pit stop groups that we had had. And I think when they made the decision to go for it, they just figured that the pit stop could put us out of the race. By staying out, if he could drive the way we thought he could drive and save fuel, that we would make the end of the race. And no one else could go that far except him. It was getting like 2.6 miles a gallon near the end, and keeping Michael Andretti at bay, who had fuel. And I think we had like 3/4 of a liter or something in the tank when it was finished.
There will be 2 to go this time by.
2 laps, Mike, 2 laps.
And they are so calm on that radio from the pits. 2 laps, Michael.
You notice, of course, Michael didn't answer him. He's awful quiet right now. He's got his hands full, trying to find a way. Every little bit, trying to make up a little bit on Greg Moore, force him into a mistake.
Meanwhile, Moore, just 22 years old, looking for his first career win. Final lap, Moore leads Andretti. 2 corners remain for Michael to try to close up on Moore. Only 22 starts in Moore's resume. Could this be the day for Greg Moore and the players team from Canada? I don't think Michael has enough time. Moore thinks he hasn't won, and with his fist in the air, he takes the checkered flag and resets the record as youngest winner of a PPG Kart World Series event. Mario Andretti on the wall can only get on the radio and say, nice try. Neil Mickelwright and the crew, they will have a celebration tonight. What a breakthrough for the Canadian Greg Moore. Jan Beekes is standing by with Greg Moore's dad.
Yes, Rick Moore. Man, I've never seen you so excited, obviously. You just about wore out those tennis shoes. Got to be a great thrill for a dad today.
Oh, it is. You know, we've been so close so many times and had a couple taken away from us. And just, everybody really worked. The whole players team just really worked for this one.
Hey,
great victory.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And look at Jimmy Vasser come over to give a thumbs up to Greg Moore. Vasser unofficially finishes third behind Michael Andretti. But this day is all about the young man from Maple Ridge, British Columbia. Let's get down to Gary Gerald.
It is pandemonium down here. Greg Moore, you've just realized a dream.
Yeah, it's about time. You know, we've been real close a few times, but I'm just so happy. I mean, everyone on my team did a great job, and we had about probably a cup full of fuel left there. You know, Steve Chalice and Alex Turman's my two engineers. They did just a great job. I'm just so happy.
The youngest now winner in this type of racing in kart history. The feeling that you have, tell me about those last few laps, because I know you knew that Michael Andretti in that black and white number 6 was right there.
Yeah, I knew Mikey was back there, but I knew I was a little bit faster than him. It was just a question of that slower traffic in front, but we got through it okay, and it's our first win, and I just can't, I'm so happy.
Were you able, did you have to conserve fuel, and when did they tell you you were going to be okay? How late to go?
About 12 laps to go, they told me I was okay, and I was actually lifting down from about pitch straight down to the turn 1, and it just paid off. I mean, we did a great job all weekend.
In traffic all day long, any close calls for you, any major concerns?
There was a couple of close calls, but, you know, we got it all, and I'm just so pleased. All my guys, they deserve this.
All of Canada, all of North America saluting you right now, the youngest ever. Kick off the celebration, pal.
Thanks a lot, bud.
After waiting and working so long for his first taste of Champ Car champagne, Greg Moore only had to wait one more week for the second, in Detroit, where fuel management would again govern the day's activity.
Someone has hit the wall. Let's go back to Bob.
It's a Richie Hearn in turn 11. You can see from the tracks, he spun it in rear end first.
Oh, and is that really going to help Greg Moore there? Because he had not made a pit stop. Everybody else pitted under green. He's going to get the opportunity to come in under a yellow.
And we have action in the pit lane. Race leader Greg Moore is in. There's Mauricio Gugelmin from second place, pitting just behind Moore.
Now, this is the longest. This is the guy that has gone the longest without a stop. Greg Moore, remember, of the leaders. And this caution is very advantageous. Gary, let's check in with Parker Johnstone's pit stop.
There's Greg Moore, who had not led a lap this year until 2 races ago at Gateway International in St. Louis. Then Milwaukee, where he won. Now he leads here in Detroit. 3 races in a row with 1 victory. Look at that line of cars running nose to tail behind the PacWest teammates. Remember, they have only stopped once. Jack Arute has more on them.
And right now, Bob, they are trying PacWest for both Lundell and Gugelmin. They're trying to see if they could go without having to stop again. They, as Gary reported for Carpentier, feel they need at least 1 or 2 more laps of yellow. So with 15 laps to go, they're running out of yellow opportunities. So what they're doing now is fuel management, going up and down clicks on what they call the fuel mapping on board the car. But they are going to run it right down to the end.
And Patrick Carpentier, the leader in the Rookie of the Year standings, comes in. His crew waves him down. Let's see how
on the marks. Oh, the car having to back it up. They weren't perfect on the marks. The fuel hole still won't stretch. He's too far from the wall. This is a disaster. Carpentier throws
You can't pass at Detroit. He was already accepted 3rd place, but he said he was going to push him as hard as he could. And that was the strategy, just push them as hard as they could and be right on them and see if they could just, you know, every time they got on the gas a little bit harder, that's a little less they had to do, and that's what we did. And we're fortunate enough to win 2 in a row, and his words when he came across the line were, "I just won Detroit."
On to the strand. How much throttle can... And Gugelmin slows. Lundell bursts into the lead. as his teammate slows out of fuel. And now Greg Moore has a decision to make. I could have passed him for second. Can I pass him for my second consecutive lead? Bruce McCaw and the team looking on. It's all in the hands of Mark Blundell.
He's only got 2 corners to go.
Blundell in the middle of the racetrack. Defensive position. Michael Andretti doing the same in what is now third place. And Blundell slows. Moore is in the lead. Blundell is out of fuel. And it has all come apart for the PacWest teammates. Victory. Second straight win for Greg Moore. Michael Andretti second. Gilles de Ferran unofficially third. And Jimmy Vasser, a near thing, in fourth. Is it possible that first and second place run out of fuel on the last lap?
Mike, that's exactly what happened. Both teams ran out of fuel. They were just a couple of 1,000 yards short of going to victory lane. Well, Greg Moore, congratulations. You've gotten the congratulations from Mercedes, from your dad. What did your dad tell you?
Oh, my dad just said, "Good job." You know, it's this is the team's win. This one. I mean, we stretched it out on the. It was Steve Chalice's call to leave the Firestones on for. I think we left them on for. Over half the race there, and I think that's really what won us the race, was the pit position there.
Now, what about near the end? Blundell and Gugelmin in front of you. What was the conversations back and forth on pit road with your team?
2 laps from the end, they said, "Well, if you get a possibility, a good chance to pass, you better do it, because we think they might be able to go." And then I saw Maurizio bobble, and then down the end of the back, I saw Mark, and I thought, "Wow, I just can't believe this. This is unbelievable."
At 22 years old, we've said you're the youngest winner, and now a Canadian that wins, now so much on your shoulders. I mean, can it stop? I mean, where does this all end for you?
Let's hope it never stops. I just love this. This is beautiful. I love it.
Chapter 3 of Greg Moore's Victory Quintet was written in South America at the beginning of 1998. Based on a brilliant drive from the inside of the 4th row, Greg held on to the race in the face of some bad luck in regard to pit work. A slow stop the first time in cost him places, and near collision on the second cost him a chance to move forward. Brilliant work from his team on the 3rd stop moved Greg from 5th to 2nd, in position to challenge Alex Zanardi. In the late laps, he grabbed the brass ring. The day required the capacity to face a large number of risk opportunities and the good sense to carefully select which one to take. Greg finished first, having led only 5 laps of 133, the last 5.
Yeah, I didn't think he had room. He always knew where the car was and where the cars around him were. He had a magic. It's kind of like a Gretzky thing. Gretzky always knows where his players are and where the puck is. And Greg seemed to have that feeling. He knew where he was. Because when he pulled in front of Zanardi, I don't think he had much more than a foot or two. And he pulled in front of him, and enough he took the air off his nose. And then it was just, kind of hold your fingers and make sure, because I knew he had enough fuel. And I didn't think Alec could be able, I think as soon as he got through that corner and then Alec was, had washed up toward the wall, I didn't think Alec would be able to catch him.
The last lap, Zanardi was much faster than Greg Moore. Moore sliding it around through turn 1, up through turn 2, flat out onto the backstretch. I think Moore's going to have enough to hold off Alex Zanardi. He's held off Michael Andretti in the past when he took his first win in Milwaukee last year. He won't be fazed by seeing the Italian behind, but the Italian never, ever gives up. Oh, they both get past Mark Blundell. Zanardi tries to take advantage of that. I don't think there's going to be enough time. Out of turn 4, the last corner, the run to the checkered flag. Greg Moore is going to take his first win of the 1998 season. A brilliantly driven race. Alex Zanardi in a fine second position, but the championship means that Moore further extends his title lead, and Zanardi second from Fernandez in 3rd place.
Oh, the emotion of Victory Lane, nothing replaces it. Father, son, Rick and Greg Moore embracing here. And Greg Moore, I guess racing can't get any more exciting than what you've showed us over the last 10 miles or so.
Oh, that was really exciting. I mean, we knew we had a good shot, but, Alex was awfully quick down the straightaway. We were a bit quicker than him under braking, and that's all it was. He had a little bubble coming out of 4, and he took the inside. I took the outside and passed a couple guys that way, and I mean, good job for the guys. We were back in 11th place. They gave me a pit stop, got me up to like 3rd or 4th, and they did an unreal job. I mean, what a great way to leave Brazil.
You saw Arndt Meyer in that bright yellow car, and you knew that this might be your one and only opportunity, I'm sure.
That was it. I mean, my car, once he got into a bit of traffic in 1 and 4, had a bit of an understeer, so I knew if I got real close to Alex that my car would understeer a bit. Same thing as Miami, you know, Arn Meyer got in the way of Alex, and I capitalized on it, and I'm just really pleased.
Our guys in the booth, and I didn't get a chance to see it, but they said you got it almost sideways one time. How concerned were you of losing it?
At that one time, I was really concerned. I thought, oh, you know, God, you know, I had such a good ride going, but, you know, luckily I just let off the gas and turned into it, kind of like I did when I spun on in qualifying yesterday, but I'm just really, really pleased. I mean, what a great day.
Later in the summer, Greg Moore prevailed again when the champ cars gathered at the high banks of Michigan Speedway for their annual lightning quick battle. One of 9 men to lead that day, Greg engaged a host of others in a breathtaking duel better than even the most ancient enthusiast could remember.
I think in the 500-mile races, to be honest with you, that it's more of a bit more of an equipment deal, a crapshoot, you know. And if you're running at the end and you're running strong, and our deal was that, I mean, he almost won Fontana the same year and 20 miles from the end. And we'd come back, we went 2 laps down. We had a tire problem. We were 2 laps down and came back, and with 20 miles to go, he's leading the race and driving away again, and the engine let go. I think you've got to be in a position to win a 500-mile race, and you need a lot of luck.
A 500-mile event requires more than just plain skill and being quick. It requires a driver to accept a certain amount of mechanical responsibility. It's very difficult for a driver to do that. And it takes a great deal of patience, and it takes a great deal of mental acuity to be able to do that and therefore win a 500-mile event. Early on in his career, for instance, we would go to, let's say, the Michigan 500, and you know, Greg was not happy unless he was leading. You don't need to lead the race early on, you know, especially if it means that you've got to punish the car in order to make that happen. So I think that it not only meant that he was quick, it not only meant that he was able to set up a car well, it meant that he was able to have the mental strength to be able to go more slowly than he could go in order to make the car last long enough that he could in fact bring home the win.
White flag for Jimmy Vasser. Zanardi attacking for third. Make that second. Oh, will they go 3 wide? No.
It is a ploy by Jimmy Vasser to back off a little bit, get Greg Moore's draft, and see if he can snooker him on the last lap. Look at Jimmy coming.
Here comes Zanardi. Does he have the horsepower despite that smoke from the back of the car? Greg Moore draws to a couple of car lengths away, and he will win the US 500. And I believe Jimmy Vasser hung on for second over his teammate as Alex Zanardi's engine coughs its last.
And I can tell you, Scott Moore was right. You don't want to lead the last lap. Greg Moore passed him, and look at that.
The 17th different winner in 19 500-mile races here at Michigan. And for Greg Moore, this is sweet redemption.
And remember, guys, he had to do it with a totally burnt-out clutch. He had more than his share of problems. Greg Moore, now he lifts the visor, and he'll be able to see emotion at its finest. A picture is worth 10,000 words. This is an entire novel in Victory Lane right now. Well, Greg Moore taking his earpieces out, getting ready to get started here on what has to be a very emotional Victory Lane for you. The camera is over this way, Greg, and after a great start of a season, more than your share of problems, now you've battled back. Jerry Forsythe and company, they're going to congratulate you now, but I want to talk about those last couple of laps. That was intense.
Wow.
That's all I can say, thanks. Oh, just the players, guys, gave me great pit stops all day. I mean, we stalled the car twice in the pits. We had a bit of a mechanical or electronic problem there, but we bounced back from it. We knew we had a good car. It was just a question there right at the end. You know, both the Ganassi cars were awfully fast, but we just managed to get them on that last lap going into one.
You know, everybody says, and you've heard it, I know many times, that patience is so important with a 500-mile race. How much patience did you have to practice today?
None. It was flat out from the beginning to the end. I mean, you know, we knew that the Mercedes would be, you know, reliable enough. It's just a question of, could we get the brakes? And we got the brakes today, and I'm just so pleased for all these guys.
The final winning chapter of Greg Moore's story came in Homestead, site of his Champ Car debut a mere 3 years earlier. The day was nearly perfect. From pole, Greg led the first third of the race and the last third. He was never out of contention, and he controlled the event whether he was on the point or not. Team Moore had come an incredible distance since those days in the parking lot of the Chrysler dealership in Maple Ridge.
What Rick and Greg brought was not, to the racetrack at least, was not so much a father and son relationship, but a relationship of two people who knew each other better than anybody else on the planet.
Greg Moore now using every inch of this race course to keep speed and momentum up with 2 laps to go. He is the leader, followed by Michael Andretti, the winner of the past 2 races here at Homestead. And as he comes off the corner, Michael closes. Still, it's going to be a very dicey last lap. I don't think he can do it. 1.9 seconds was the interval across the line as the white flag comes out. There's Michael Andretti in pursuit now. But remember, if the engine would falter at this moment, things could change. Oh, what a great gamble they've taken, and it looks like, in fact, it may pay off. Greg Moore up off of turn 3, now off of 4. Looking at the checkered flag. The gamble pays off. Greg Moore takes his 5th career win, his 4th on an oval.
And Greg, this is one of those ideal ways to start the season. I don't imagine you could be happier, but what we're wondering, how much of a gamble was it in terms of the fuel in the last few laps? Were you nervous?
I was running the leanest that I could for a while, and then they kept telling me to bring it off, bring it off, bring it off. And, you know, my guys, the whole players team, I mean, Alex deserves a big pat in the head for this, and he's our fuel guy. And, I mean, what an awesome job, I mean, for everybody here. Just first race of the year, you know, this place, almost like it owed us something, and we finally got it. I mean, it's a good job for everybody.
Have you been feeling any kind of pressure because so many people have said you and your team are top championship caliber material for 1999?
Well, I think this just shows that we're going to be good on the ovals. It's just a question now what happens on the street and the road circuits. But I firmly expect once we get to Long Beach, we'll surprise a lot of people. But, I mean, what a perfect day. I mean, I was a little worried there because Dario was running so strong, but then he came in. He wouldn't gamble on that fuel, and I had confidence in my guys. It's just a great day for everyone here at the Players team.
Growing hand in hand with Greg Moore's success on the racetrack were demands on his time, from the media, from fans, even from friends, who more than once suggested he leave Maple Ridge for the glitter of more famous cities.
He certainly had them wanting him to move there, you know, but I think he had friends here, and as evidenced by some of his drivers, you know, friends were just really important to him. And family, you know, he never missed a family dinner, and and it would cost him because he had to take an extra airplane or 2 to get home to Vancouver instead of Miami, and he wanted to pay that price. I think this was like a getaway from the pressures of anything to do with car racing. No matter where he went, someone wanted to talk to him about his last race, and you know, he had some bad ones, you know, mechanical problems and whatever, and of course they all wanted the story. And he could come up here. We use this as an exercise area. We rode our mountain bikes here, and he'd come up and paddle around out there in his little float tube, and the only thing that someone would ask him was what kind of a fly he was using. And that'd be if he was awake, because he'd go out there and fall asleep and drift around for 2 hours. And it was just a great unwinding place for him.
Greg Moore touched people. He touched people in ways that most of us will never know. He never betrayed his instincts and training on the track. Out there, it was all business. But off the track, there was time for fun. There was time for camaraderie. It was Greg who formed the Brat Pack. It was Greg who would throw a huge party at the drop of a hat, then hire cabs to make sure everyone got home safely. It was Greg who was almost happier on the occasion of Dario Franchitti's first victory than Dario himself. It was Greg who brought a kinship and understanding to the drivers that had been missing for a long time, a feeling far more familiar to the age of Fangio and Moss than the age of Prost and Mansell and Senna. Those that let it touch them, those that let him touch them, will never forget.
Yeah. Isn't it brilliant? Isn't it great? All the pressure and all the money involved, and yet we go and do that and have such a good time. And you know, I'm sure there was team owners who were very, very wary of these friendships. But we never crossed, I certainly with Greg, never crossed that line. You know, there was stuff we wouldn't talk about concerning cars and setup and stuff. But you know, it was wonderful. It was a great time.
We're all good, but some people have something more, and I think he had something more. And I got a chance to fight with him a couple times at the racetrack, and he was very clean and very aggressive. He used to brake pretty deep and not giving up his position at all. So you couldn't see. I mean, you could see that he had something else, and then you can't learn that. It's natural. It's a talent.
They say it costs nothing to be nice, but he didn't really have to be nice to anybody, and he was the person who would always go and do those things and introduce people and bring everybody together. All the drivers, there's certain drivers, this one doesn't like this one doesn't like this one, but everybody liked Greg, and Greg was the centerpiece, and he helped sort of mend a lot of bridges, I'll tell you. You know, he helped a lot of people who had some difficulties maybe on the track or stuff. He kind of brought them back together just by organizing things and bringing them all together.
We're all kind of in this bubble with each other and all going around in this same circus, and we've all got to get along and be able to function away from the racetrack and have fun, and to make this a fun lifestyle, because it's not an easy lifestyle and it's not an easy life to live, although the benefits from it are great. But you know, if you're walking around the paddock with a bunch of enemies, then it just makes things more uncomfortable. And I think we're all able to separate what happens on the racetrack and what you know, what goes on away from the racetrack, to have some fun and enjoy what we're doing, because that's what's most important. And I think that's what Greg left behind. He always enjoyed what he was doing and always had a smile on his face. Even when things weren't going well, he was happy.
Making friends is the most beautiful thing in life, and I would never trade to not knowing Greg. You know, I think I would be really upset if I didn't got to know him the way that I did.
You know, everybody talks about the special relationship we have, and I really think we did. You know, I mean, he was 24 years old, and we'd go in a restaurant, and he'd stand there and put his arm around my shoulder and lean on me or whatever it was, you know. And you know, I'd kiss his hand before he got in the car, and I think a lot of 24-year-olds wouldn't like that, maybe. But we were really unique. But we ran on the edge too. I mean, we ran on the edge because I was his dad, which is tough enough to be a teenager or a young man's dad, particularly when the kid's potentially going to be earning more money than you ever have thought of doing. I was his manager, so I looked after his financial thing, which was never a problem. And on a couple times I said, maybe someone else, we should get somebody else to do it. And he said, Dad, with you doing it, I never have to worry about my money. I guess I was a bit of a coach on the track, and I was probably his biggest fan.
Since I was 10 years old, I'd watch Ayrton Senna, Rick Mears, Alan Allenshire Jr., Michael, Mario, and you'd watch these guys, and that's what I wanted to do. I mean, I wanted to do that one day. Honestly, deep down inside, I wanted to, but I didn't think there was ever a chance I would. You know, a kid growing up in Coquitlam and Maple Ridge, there's no way that you can, you know, 99.999% of the people won't be able to do it. But with the faith that my dad had in me and other people along the way.
He sees the flags and fist raised in the air. Greg Moore is the winner at Miami.
Could this be the day for Greg Moore and the Players team from Canada? I don't think Michael has enough time. Moore thinks he hasn't won with his fist in the air. He takes the checkered flag and resets the record. Moore is in the lead. Blundell is out of fuel. And it has all come apart for the PacWest teammates. Victory. Second straight win for Greg Moore. Greg Moore draws to a couple of car lengths away, and he will win the US 500.
Run to the checkered flag. Greg Moore is going to take his first win of the 1998 season. A brilliantly driven race.
The gamble pays off. Greg Moore takes his 5th career win, his 4th